What is up, Coaster Conquerors? It is me, Austin, and today I will be counting down the top 10 wooden roller coasters I've ridden. The last time I did a wooden roller coaster ranking was about 3 years ago, and given that my coaster count has more than doubled since then, that ranking really needs an update. Before I get into the list, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you won't miss a single upload. At the number 10 spot is White Lightning at Fun Spot America in Orlando, Florida. This is what I'd consider a bit of a smaller scale GCI wooden coaster. My only rides on it were in January 2018, but from what I remember, this is a fun little coaster with fast-paced twists and turns, as well as plenty of solid airtime moments. I don't remember it being the smoothest wooden coaster out there, and I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites either, but considering it's one of only 2 wooden roller coasters in the Orlando area, it's a fun ride for sure. Now, I must admit that I am yet to ride this with a little section of GCI Titan track that was added to it in 2020, so I would definitely like to rewrite it with that section at some point to see how that improves the smoothness of it. At the number 9 spot is Apocalypse the Ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California. This is another coaster from GCI, but it's one that I'd consider a larger scale twister wooden coaster. This ride has the fun GCI twister layout that I really like, only it was a bit rougher than I was hoping for, although my ride on it last year may have been worse than others' rides on it. I find it odd that my ride on it was more rough than I feel like it should have been, because I believe it has been fully retracked not terribly long ago. But besides that, it is a fun twister coaster with fast pacing and even a solid amount of airtime from what I remember, and I'm happy that it is the last remaining wooden coaster in the park. At the number 8 spot is Invader at Busch Gardens Williamsburg in Williamsburg, Virginia. This is another small-scale GCI wooden coaster like the aforementioned White Lightning, and this is one that would also be considered a family coaster at the park. I found this to be a fun coaster that felt a lot like a mini version of my second favorite GCI coaster, which is later on this list. I also found the tunnel on the drop to be interesting on this ride, since it is the only wooden coaster I've ridden with that feature. The ride has some solid airtime moments and some fun twists and turns. I found the ride to be worth riding despite it being a bit of a short ride experience. It is a solid wooden coaster in the park's collection of awesome coasters. At the number 7 spot is Mind Blower at the Kissimmee location of Fun Spot America. This Gravity Group coaster is unique because not only is it the only Gravity Group coaster I've ridden, but it's also the only wooden coaster I've ridden with an inversion. This compact wooden coaster features an element after its drop that RCDB calls a corkscrew, but in my opinion looks like a 0G roll. It is also a very fast-paced coaster with plenty of twists and turns. I will say though that the coaster is very rough for its age. It opened in 2017, but when I rode it in early 2021, it was definitely a rough experience. I do think, however, that the extra thrilling layout does make up for its roughness, and the ride is still quite a mind-blowing experience.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
At the number 6 spot is the Racer at Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. This is definitely the oldest coaster on this list, opening with its park in 1972. When I rode it in 2021, I thought it was a really solid wooden coaster with some solid airtime, and I also really liked the dueling aspect of it. There were some rough patches on it, but besides that, I thought the roughness wasn't that bad for a wooden coaster that was almost 50 at the time. I also had enough fun on this coaster to consider it my 4th favorite one in the park. I feel like my bias towards this ride would be a bit less if I rode it again, since it has such a basic coaster layout pretty much for a wooden coaster. But regardless, it is a fun and classic wooden coaster. At the number 5 spot is Wildcat at Hershey Park in Hershey, Pennsylvania. This was the first roller coaster from GCI, and it operated from 1996 to 2022. I got to ride it just weeks before its permanent closure, and I actually found it to be a fun and underappreciated wooden coaster. It had a fun twister layout that paved the way for other GCI twister woodies, and it had some good airtime and pacing. It was a pretty rough coaster, but I was definitely able to overlook that because of how genuinely fun it was. However, I would love to ride its successor at some point, which is an RMC hybrid called Wildcat's Revenge, since it looks like an even better coaster than Wildcat was. That said, this will be remembered by me as one of my favorite now-defunct coaster credits. At the number 4 spot is what I consider to be the superior Hershey Park GCI Woody, Lightning Racer, but I only got to ride the Lightning side, so this is where I rank it. This coaster is just a bit better than the late Wildcat for a couple of reasons. For one, it is a dueling coaster, making it a more fun experience to compete with the other side of the ride. Additionally, despite it still having that Wildcat bite to it, I feel like the transitions on it were a bit smoother than those of Wildcat, despite it opening only a few years later than it in 2000. I'm glad that this coaster and its rival side, which is called Thunder, remains standing since Hershey Park still has a pair of GCI wooden coasters. I am yet to ride the Thunder side of it though. At the number 3 spot is Thunderhead at Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. I wasn't very impressed with this ride during my first visit to the park in June of 2017. However, during my revisit in October 2020, I was actually impressed with just how fun the ride was, and with how much smoother the ride felt for a wooden coaster. It still has a wooden coaster bite to it, but I feel like it was much less than I remembered from my first ever rides on it, and I believe that's because of an at least partial retracking. Anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed this ride because of its quick pacing and even a bit of airtime, but it was to even an amazing extent on this ride. I made sure to get several rides on it, including at least one night ride during my 2020 visit to the park, and it was just such a wild and fun ride for me. Because of that visit, this ride went from being an okay coaster in the park to one of my favorites in the park. At the number 2 spot is Mystic Timbers at Kings Island in Mason, Ohio. Although this list has been mostly GCI coasters, this is my favorite GCI Woody. Unlike Thunderhead, this coaster has an out and back layout as opposed to a twister layout. In my opinion, this is almost the same in quality to Thunderhead, with its plentiful airtime and awesome pacing, and hot take, this ride is actually my favorite coaster at Kings Island. The reason why I rank it above Thunderhead is actually because of its theming. It has audio on the lift hill alerting riders about going into an unsafe area and warning them about the shed. The shed itself is at the brake run with audio, warning signs, and an animation. Because of the extra detail that enhances this ride, it has a little step up from Thunderhead and is my favorite GCI wooden coaster. That said, I've ridden just one wooden coaster that tops this one. At the number 1 spot is Lightning Rod at Dollywood in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, but I must make a clear distinction. I'm talking about the OG Lightning Rod when it was entirely an RMC Topper Track Woody with no steel track, and before they added trims after the launch. My only ever experiences on this ride were in June 2017, so it's been about 7 years since I've had any experiences on this unique ride, because it was actually closed during my October 2020 visit for maintenance, unfortunately. But anyway, this was the first ever launched wooden coaster, and I found it to be an amazingly thrilling experience during my rides on it. I feel very blessed that I got to ride it in what many coaster enthusiasts consider its prime, since during that time period, it was infamously unreliable. This ride was just insane to me because of its crazy speed for a wooden coaster, which was 73 miles per hour, as well as its thrilling launch and its incredible pacing, as well as its crazy ejector airtime, such as on that wild quadruple down. That is quite an element if you ask me. The ride is the definition of wild, especially when it was in its prime. Though I am interested to see how the ride experience is now, and I really hope to ride it again in its updated version. For now though, Lightning Rod is my favorite wooden coaster from my experience on the OG version of it. So that's my ranking of my top 10 favorite wooden coasters that I've ridden. There are still plenty of top 10 worthy coasters that I'm hoping to ride someday, such as El Toro at Six Flags Great Adventure and The Voyage at Holiday World, but for now, these are my favorite. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you haven't already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications to be notified of more more theme park related content like this. I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye guys.